my name is Dennis Van Engelsdorp, and I'm with the Be Informed Partnership. And today we're going to be talking about carbohydrate feeding in terms of the results from the Winter Loss and Management Survey of 2011-2012. As you know, carbohydrates are the sugars, and as beekeepers we use a lot of sugar in feeding our colonies. If we look at people who use carbohydrate feed and those who don't, what you can see is that most people, over 80% of beekeepers, in fact, do indicate they feed something to their colonies, but there was no significant difference between people who did use the product and didn't. Again, this is correlative data though, so you can't make too many conclusions about those who did and didn't. It could very well be that the people who didn't or did use the product, and if they didn't, there might be some serious ramifications. If we look by region, you can see that all multi-regional beekeepers used some carbohydrate feed, which makes sense. We didn't see any other regional breakdown between losses, and so again, no regional effect in terms of people who did or did not use carbohydrate feed and their losses over winter. However, when we look at it more closely and we look at the type of feed beekeepers used, you can see that there was some effect. People who used candy board as a way of feeding their colonies lost significantly fewer colonies than those who used a different type of feed. And then people who used frames of honey, in fact, lost higher numbers of colonies than those who did not use frames of honey and rather used a different type of carbohydrate feed. That's an interesting result, and again, I want to emphasize that this is correlative data. It could very well be that the people who were using frames of honey simply were losing a lot more colonies and so had a lot more frames of honey to feed colonies. And so it might not be a direct effect. It may be sort of a consequence of loss rather than a cause of loss. However, there is growing evidence to show that there may be some pathogens that are in the honey and frames of honey, such as viruses, and so there may be some biological basis for this difference too. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but it's certainly suggestive, and I think we have to take a little bit more care in looking at what we're feeding our colonies. Generally speaking, I think it's safe to say that when we're feeding our colonies, we want to feed them clean food, and certainly we want to make sure that the sugar we feed them doesn't contain starch, so not beet sugar or brown sugar, because that's likely to give them dysentery over the winter. The information is for educational purposes only. References to commercial products or trade names do not imply endorsement by the Be Informed Partnership or its members. The results presented here are the summary of the population who responded. The sample may not be representative of the beekeeping population at large. These results simply highlight differences in the sample population. The results cannot be considered conclusive, causative, protective, or attest to product efficacy or lack of efficacy.